Keisha wiped down the worn Formica counter for the third time that morning. She breathed in the familiar scent of coffee and frying bacon, letting it steady her tired mind. The small diner sat on a quiet corner of town, its neon sign flickering open in soft green light. Inside, every table was lined with vinyl seats, and the air held a gentle hum of conversation and clinking dishes. Keisha had been here for 3 years, and she knew every regular's order by heart. Today, just like every day, she tied her apron tight, adjusted her name tag, and prepared for another long shift. At 26, Keisha already felt years older. She worked double shifts to cover rent for her tiny apartment and to send a little money home to her younger brother in college. Sometimes her back ached so badly that she slipped pain relievers between tables. Her uniform was always neat, but under her crisp white shirt, she carried the weight of bills, worries, and a hope that things would get easier soon. She smiled at each customer, pouring cream and sugar, taking extra napkins, so no one would guess how tired she truly was. Mr. Thompson entered just after lunch, as he had done every day for weeks. His frame was small and thin, like a sapling in late winter, and he moved slowly, each step marked by quiet pain. He chose the same seat by the window, where sunlight pooled over vinyl. Keisha noticed his faded tweed coat and the soft wool scarf that draped around his neck. He ordered only black coffee, his voice low and gravelly. No breakfast, no lunch, just coffee and time to stare at the passing cars and distant people. She watched him from across the room. His hands trembled as he lifted the ceramic mug to his lips. He took a slow sip, eyes never leaving the street. Keisha's heart pinched at the sight of him, alone and hungry. Every day she wondered why he came. Did he have family? A warm home? Money for a full meal? She feared the answers. And hunger showed in his sunken cheeks and hollow eyes. His coat hung loosely over his frail shoulders, and the scarf did little to warm him as he shivered by the window. The diner's rules were strict. Free meals for customers were forbidden, and managers watched every plate that left the kitchen. Keisha understood. Why? The owner already squeezed profits thin to pay bills and staff. But her own rules of kindness felt stronger. She balanced plates and trays, but her mind drifted back to Mr. Thompson. Between greeting tables, she dipped into her thoughts of what he must feel: cold mornings, empty cupboards, the sharp ache of an empty stomach. Lunch rush came quickly. The doors swung open, letting in a tide of office workers in crisp suits. Orders flew in, burgers with fries, club sandwiches, omelets piled high with cheese. Keisha moved with practiced ease, carrying plates piled high on her arms. She cracked jokes, refilled coffee cups, and smiled at hungry customers. Yet in the corner of her eye, she saw Mr. Thompson tracing patterns on the tablecloth with his fingertip. He had not ordered food, only more coffee. On her break, Keisha slipped outside. The sun felt warm on her face, but she only stopped for a moment to rest against the brick wall. She closed her eyes and fought back tears. She thought of her own mother, who had taught her to share food with those in need. She thought of her brother, who sometimes admitted he skipped meals to save money. She thought of Mr. Thompson, with his lifeless coat and gentle smile. She felt a twist of anger at the world that let kind people go hungry. By the time she returned inside, determination settled in her chest. She decided that tomorrow she would do something, a small act, maybe a slice of pie, or a bowl of soup. She would find a way to share, even if she had to cover the cost herself. She reminded herself to stay calm. She needed to follow the rules until the moment felt right. The last thing she wanted was to lose this job, which, despite its struggles, gave her a chance to help in small ways. That evening, as the dinner crowd trickled in, Keisha kept an eye on Mr. Thompson. He sat until the sun dipped low. Shadows. Stretching across his table, when the waiter came to clear his cup, he shook his head. He had no money for a meal. He paid the small tab for coffee with coins that sounded like whispers in the metal tray. Keisha offered a gentle smile, but he did not see it. He stood slowly, grabbed his coat, and shuffled toward the door. Keisha watched him go, heart pounding. Outside, The wind turned chilly, and she wrapped her scarf tighter. She imagined him walking down the empty street, making his way back to wherever he lived. Did he have a home at all? She pictured him opening a door to a dark room, with only a thin blanket to rest on. Her chest ached. She felt powerless, caught. Between rules and compassion, after her shift ended, Keisha closed the diner doors behind her. She locked up carefully, storing the key in her pocket. The street lamps glowed golden in the early night. She walked home slowly, each step echoing. Her thoughts. She thought about fish and rice, bread and butter, cakes and cookies, all meals she could buy, all meals she took for granted. And Mr. Thompson, who had nothing but coffee and the heavy burden of hunger. At her apartment, Keisha sat on the edge of her bed. She turned on a small lamp and unwrapped a simple sandwich she had saved from lunch. She ate slowly, tasting every crumb. She thought of him having nothing. She closed her eyes, remembering the fear in his stare. She hugged the blankets around her knees, feeling both sadness and a spark of hope. Tomorrow, she promised, she would bring him food, no matter what. Sleep finally came late, but it was restless. Keisha dreamed of empty plates and hungry eyes. She woke with a start before dawn. Her heart pounded at the idea of breaking the rules, yet her soul demanded action. She closed her eyes, whispered a promise to be brave, and drifted back to a restless slumber. In the quiet night, her kindness burned brightly, ready to guide her in the days to come. Keisha woke before dawn again, her mind full of both hope and fear. All night she had turned over the idea in her head. Could she really sneak food to Mr. Thompson without getting caught? She dressed quickly, pulling on her uniform and grabbing a thin cloth bag from the kitchen counter. Inside, she placed a turkey sandwich wrapped in wax paper and a small carton of soup. She tied the bag's handles tight and slipped out the back door, heart hammering. The diner was quiet when she arrived. The linoleum floor shone under the overhead lights, and the scent of brewed coffee hung in the air. No one else was there yet. Keisha set the bag on Mr. Thompson's usual table, where the sunlight would soon pool through the window. So she tucked herself behind the counter and watched, breath held tight. Mr. Thompson entered exactly at 7:30. Shoulders drooped under the weight of an old wool coat, and he hunched forward as he carried his cane. He paused by the table, his eyes widening at the sight before him. He looked around, as if surprised by the gift of food waiting there. He reached out with slender fingers, lifting the sandwich and the soup carton gently. Keisha felt a warm flutter in her chest as she watched him take a cautious bite. He closed his eyes, nodded once, and then opened them to look toward the counter. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met hers, filled with compassion, his with gratitude. Then he turned back to eat, taking slow, careful bites, as if each one had magic inside. Over the next few days, Keisha grew bolder. She added small notes to each meal. Enjoy. K. Sometimes she slipped in a piece of fruit or a small carton of milk. She packed oatmeal with honey on colder mornings and a bowl of chicken soup when the diner kitchen made too much. Times she felt a mixture of fear and delight, hoping the manager would not notice, but wanting Mr. Thompson to feel cared for. Mr. Thompson began to look forward to his secret breakfast. He arrived a bit earlier, leaning on his cane as he trudged through the door. He paused by the table, glanced around, and then sat. He would pick up the note first, unfold it carefully, and read with a small smile. Then he would eat in silence, sometimes humming a low tune under his breath. Keisha listened to the melody, certain it came from his heart. One afternoon, as Keisha refilled coffee cups, she overheard two coworkers whispering near the register. "Did you see the food on Mr. Thompson's table?" one asked. "Yes," said the other. "He didn't pay for it." Someone must be slipping him meals. Keisha's heart sank. She kept serving customers, hands trembling as she poured coffee. She wondered if they suspected her, if they would speak to the manager, if her job was at risk. That evening, after the dinner rush, the manager found Keisha wiping down tables. He cleared his throat, and she looked up, forcing a calm smile. "Keisha," he said softly. I know what you're doing. Her stomach dropped. She did not answer. He continued. I see those meals. I know you pay for them yourself. You care. But if you keep this up, I can't protect you. He paused, his eyes kind but firm. Stop feeding him, or you'll have to find work elsewhere. Keisha's mind raced. She saw the stack of bills waiting at home. She thought of her brother who needed tuition money. She knew losing this job would be disastrous, yet the thought of stopping felt like a betrayal to Mr. Thompson, who was likely starving otherwise. She bit her lip, heart torn. When she spoke, her voice was low. I understand. He nodded and left quietly, leaving Keisha alone with her guilt. That night, Keisha stood by her small kitchen table, tears in her eyes. She thought about the empty cupboard at home and the dinners she had eaten with her family when she was a child. She remembered her mother's gentle voice. Share what you have, even if it's little. She thought of Mr. Thompson's faint smile and the way his eyes lit up for one brief moment. Her heart ached. She patted the sandwich bag and whispered, I can't stop. The next morning, she arrived at the diner carrying the usual lunch bag. She glanced at the manager, who watched from the office door. He gave a slight shake of his head, and Keisha felt a shiver run down her spine. She walked to the back room, closed the door quietly, and set her bag on a small shelf. She took out a bowl of soup and a soft bun wrapped in paper. She tucked the note inside. She drew a deep breath, scooped up the bowl, and carried it into the dining room. Mr. Thompson was already at his table, head bowed as if in prayer. When she placed the food before him, he looked up with surprise. His hands trembled as he unfolded the note. His eyes misted over when he read the words. Keisha felt her own eyes burn. She left him to his meal and moved to serve another table, tears threatening to spill. Throughout the week, she continued in secret. Each meal was a small miracle, a slice of cake, a cup of fresh fruit, a bagel with cream cheese. Mr. Thompson's health seemed to improve. His steps grew steadier, and his cheeks flushed with a slight color. He no longer arrived hunched forward, but walked with a touch more confidence. Keisha smiled whenever she saw this change, certain that kindness could heal more than a doctor's care. One cloudy afternoon, the diner was unusually busy. A group of office workers had come in, filling every table. The kitchen slammed with orders, and Keisha ran back and forth, balancing plates and drinks. In the chaos, she almost forgot Mr. Thompson's meal. She dashed to the back room to grab. His lunch bag had returned just in time to set it on his table. She paused for a breath, her heart still racing, and noticed he was staring down at the bag with his head tilted. Suddenly, the manager appeared at her side. I told you to stop, he said quietly, but his voice carried an edge that caught her attention. One more meal, and I'll have to take action. Keisha's hand froze on the coffee pot. She looked at him, shame flooding her chest. He nodded toward Mr. Thompson, whose face peeked around the corner of a menu. Make your choice. Keisha's mind whirled. She could stop now, protect her job, and follow the manager's orders. Or she could keep feeding Mr. Thompson, risking everything she had worked for. She thought of his warm smile, of his silent thanks, of how a simple meal gave him new hope. She lifted her chin. I can't, she whispered. The manager's eyes narrowed and he turned away. That evening, Keisha walked home under a sky heavy with clouds. Raindrops began to fall, and she pulled her coat tighter. She clutched the small paper note she had taken from Mr. Thompson's bag, a note that read, Meet me tomorrow at sunrise, 6 a.m., by the fountain across the street. She stared at the words, heart pounding. What did he want? Had he guessed? It was her? She felt both fear and excitement. At home, she warmed soup on her stove and ate slowly, mind drifting to the meeting. She wondered if it was a trap or a promise. She thought of the kindness she had shown and asked herself if it would lead to joy or regret. She washed her bowl and spoon, then sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. She whispered to herself, tomorrow I will know. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in bed, listening to the rain against the window pane, imagining Mr. Thompson standing by the fountain, waiting. She felt the weight of her choice, the cost of compassion, and the hope that kindness would find its reward. Her thoughts swirled, and as the clock ticked toward midnight, she finally drifted into restless dreams, the note clutched in her hand, guiding her toward whatever lay ahead at sunrise. Keisha arrived at the small plaza before sunrise. The sky was still dark, but the first hints of pink light brushed the clouds. She wrapped her coat tighter against the cold and hurried toward the old stone fountain in the center. Its water was still frozen in winter's last chill, but she knew from the note that Mr. Thompson would be there. Her heart thumped so loudly she thought it might wake everyone in the silent square. Lampposts cast pools of yellow light. Over empty benches and bare trees, no other person moved. She checked her watch. 5:55. She pressed her hands into her coat pockets and breathed out slowly, willing herself to stay calm. What if he wasn't there? What if someone else had found the note? She pictured his gentle eyes and fragile frame and shivered, not from cold, but from worry. At 6 sharp, she saw him emerge from the misty sidewalk. His steps were slow but deliberate, and he carried no cane this time. He wore the same tweed coat and scarf, but somehow he looked less frail. He paused at the fountain's edge, staring at the dry basin. He looked around, expecting to find her. When their eyes met, both of them smiled, as if meeting an old friend. Keisha crossed the plaza in quick steps, her breath forming clouds in the air. She stopped a few feet away, waiting for courage. "Good morning," she whispered, though her voice rang loud in the quiet. He nodded and shifted his weight, looking both solemn and relieved. "I'm glad you came," he said softly. His voice matched the gravelly timbre from the diner, but it carried warmth now. Keisha felt tears prickling her eyes. "Almost didn't," she admitted. "I wasn't sure what you wanted." He offered a gentle laugh. "I wanted to thank you." He paused, as if choosing words carefully. "I wanted to meet the person who showed me kindness when I needed it most." Keisha's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. She shifted from one foot to the other, unsure if she should step forward or stay back. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a small envelope, sealed with a simple sticker. "This is for you," he said, handing it over. Keisha took it with trembling fingers. "It's nothing," she tried to say, but the lump in her throat stopped her. She looked up and saw a soft smile on his face, the same grateful look he had given her when he first ate the sandwich. "Open it when you feel safe," he told her. "But first, please sit." He pointed to a low stone wall around the fountain. The cold surface made Keisha wince, but she sat anyway. He joined her, folding his hands in his lap. Neither spoke for a moment, the hush of morning settling around them. Finally, Mr. Thompson spoke again. He said, "Eyes on the dark water. I owned businesses, gave speeches, and traveled the world, but I grew tired of the noise. I wanted to find my true self, away from fame and fortune. So I walked away, kept no announcements, no press. I came here to find peace." Keisha listened, amazed. She had pictured him as forgotten or abandoned, but not as someone powerful who chose this life. She felt both honored and nervous. She realized then how much courage it took him to reveal so much. "You found me," he continued, "hungry. And alone, you could have stayed silent. You could have followed the rules, but you did not. You gave me more than food. You gave me hope, and you reminded me of what truly matters." Keisha's eyes filled with tears, and she brushed one away. She wanted to say she did what anyone would, but she knew not everyone would. He turned to face her. "I want to help you," he said earnestly. "I want to repay your kindness in a way that helps others too." He smiled and patted his pocket. "I have a foundation that supports young people in need. I would like you to join me, to help feed those who struggle just as you fed me." Keisha's breath caught. Keisha had never imagined such an offer. She shook her head, confused. I'm just a waitress," she said quietly. "I barely make ends meet myself." He reached into the envelope he held and pressed it into her hands. "Please open this," he urged. With trembling fingers, Keisha broke the seal and pulled out a stack of checks, each written out to her name for hundreds of dollars. She gasped. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Use this to care for your family, your brothers, tuition, your rent, whatever you need. And then, if you wish, join me here again tomorrow at 7. We'll talk about how you can help others the way you helped me. Keisha could hardly speak. Her heart pounded, her mind raced, and tears spilled down her cheeks. She looked at the sun peeking over the rooftops and then back at Mr. Thompson. She nodded, voice trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, over and over. He stood and offered his hand. She took it, and he helped her to her feet, though her legs felt weak. They walked together toward the edge of the plaza. The city was stirring now. Cars passed by, and a few early commuters hurried along the sidewalk. It felt as if the world had awakened just for them. Before he left, Mr. Thompson paused and turned to her. "Your kindness changed my life," he said softly. "Now let me help change yours." He tipped his head, offered that warm smile, and walked back toward the street. Keisha watched him go until he disappeared around the corner. Alone, she folded the empty envelope and tucked it into her coat. Her mind spun with questions. How could this be real? Who was this man, and how would she repay such generosity? She felt a surge of excitement and a deep sense of purpose. She understood then why he had sent the note. He wanted not only to thank her, but to bring her into his world of quiet giving. Time passed quickly after that. Her feet carried her back to the diner, where the morning shift had already started. Coworkers greeted her with sleepy smiles. The manager glanced up from the office doorway, but Keisha only shook her head slightly, keeping her secret close. She moved through her tasks with new energy, wiping tables with a firm hand, carrying trays with sure steps, pouring coffee with a steady hand. As the day wore on, she found herself thinking not of her worries, but of possibilities. She pictured young students, elderly neighbors, families in need, each one waiting for someone to care. She remembered the spark of hope she saw in Mr. Thompson's eyes and felt a surge of joy. She realized that her small acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways she had never imagined. That night, after her second shift, Keisha returned home and sat at her kitchen table. The envelope lay open before her, the checks fanned out like a promise. She counted them once, then again, and let out a soft laugh, both of relief and wonder. She knew her life would change, but she also felt the weight of responsibility. She looked around her humble apartment, stacked dishes, a lone chair, thin blanket sand, thought about tomorrow's meeting at 7. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching city lights flicker against the dark sky. Her heart felt full and light at the same time, like she was floating. She thought of Mr. Thompson's gentle voice and strong handshake. She believed deeply that kindness mattered, and now, more than ever, she felt ready to share it. Sleep took her. She placed the checks in her purse and whispered a promise. "I will help others, just as I helped you." In the stillness of the night, Keisha understood that her secret gift had set off a chain of giving that would reach far beyond her little diner, and she smiled, eager for the next morning when she would step into a new life of hope, service, and unexpected blessings. Keisha climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment, her mind still buzzing with the promise of tomorrow. The checks in her purse felt heavy with possibility. She had never held so much money before. She unlocked the door and slipped inside, closing it quietly behind her. The small living room was dark, except for the glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. She set her bag on the table and switched on a lamp. Her heart still raced with the memory of Mr. Thompson's gentle smile and his offer. She cleaned up a few dishes, then made a cup of tea to calm her nerves. She sat at the little table by the window, staring at the checks spread before her. Each one bore her name in neat handwriting and a number that made her breath catch. She read them again and again, as if the words might change. She thought of her brother, of the bills she owed, of the dreams she had pushed aside. Now it felt like everything could change. She sipped her tea slowly, tasting its warmth, and felt a reassuring sense of hope settle in her chest. Night settled around her apartment, and Keisha turned off the lamp. She laid out the checks beside her bed in case she needed courage in the morning. Sleep came slowly, her thoughts dancing between fear and excitement. She imagined the next meeting at the fountain, of the work she might do with the foundation, of how she could help people who struggled like she had once struggled. Finally, she drifted into dreams, clutching the checks like a promise. At dawn, a loud rumble woke her. She jerked upright, heart pounding. At first she thought it was thunder, but then she heard engines idling and deep voices murmuring outside. She slipped out of bed and crept to the window, her breath caught. 5 black SUVs lined the quiet street below, their dark windows reflecting the pale light. The cars were parked in a semicircle facing her building. She counted 5 massive vehicles she had only seen on TV when important people traveled. Panic prickled her skin. She backed away from the window and pressed her back against the wall. What was happening? She didn't have time to think. Footsteps and muffled talking drifted up the stairwell. She ran to the door, heart pounding. She grabbed her keys and unlocked it with trembling hands. She cracked the door open just enough to peer out. A tall man in a dark suit stood at the bottom of the stairs. His face was calm but serious. Behind him, another man held a walkie-talkie, scanning the dim hallway. Keisha swallowed hard. "Can I help you?" she asked in a small voice. "We're here for Ms. Johnson," the suited man said politely. His voice was firm but not angry. "Please come downstairs." Keisha's throat tightened. She wanted to close the door and hide. She thought of the checks on her bed. She thought of Mr. Thompson's word. She took a steadying breath and opened the door more. The hallway light flickered, casting long shadows. She stepped aside, letting the man pass. Behind him, 2 more men in suits and an older woman with a kind face followed. They all wore earpieces and carried small folders. The final man held what looked like a phone speaker. Keisha almost gasped when she saw ITSC, recognized the device from her brief time in an office internship years ago. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, one man closed the door behind them gently. She realized her hands were shaking. The woman with the kind face stepped forward. "Miss Johnson, please don't be afraid," she said softly. "You did something remarkable. We are here to thank you and to invite you to join us." Before Keisha could answer, the man with the speaker pressed a button, and a calm voice spoke. "Miss Johnson, this is Mr. Thompson. Please let her know I am grateful for her kindness. Ask her to step outside." The man turned the speaker toward her. She recognized his voice at once, soft, slightly gravelly, but warm. Keisha's heart hammered. She glanced back toward the door. The SUVs idled on the street, their tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. She swallowed and looked at the men and woman around her. Their faces were respectful, their eyes kind. The building door opened, and a wave of cold morning air swept in. Keisha stepped onto the front stoop, the suited men flanking her protectively. She walked down the few steps to the sidewalk, where the 5 black SUVs formed a silent line. That the street was still empty. Except for these vehicles, she felt like she stood in the middle of a dream. One of the men motioned toward the nearest SUV. The door swung open smoothly, revealing leather seats and a small wooden table with a note. She walked to the car, heart in her throat. The note lay on the table, sealed with a single sticker like the envelope Mr. Thompson had given her. She picked it up with shaking fingers, breaking the seal. Inside, she found a card with a simple message. "Come with us. We will take you where you need to be." Below the message was the address of a tall office building downtown. At the bottom, in clear script, was his name, Samuel Thompson. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at the SUVs, then at the suited men around her. One of them offered his hand. "Please," he said quietly. He sounded gentle. "May I help you in?" She nodded and slid into the car. The door closed behind her with a soft click. She sank into the seat, feeling both fear and excitement. The leather was cool against her coat. She looked out the window and saw the suited men fall into line behind her. Then the first SUV pulled away, and the others followed in perfect order. As they drove through the quiet streets, Keisha stared at the note in her lap. She could hardly believe it. She thought of the rough edges of her life, the tiny apartment, the long hours at the diner, the struggle to pay rent. Now she wrote, in a convoy of SUVs, taken by the man she had never truly known, but whose life she had changed. The city dawn spread gold across the buildings as they neared downtown. Traffic was light, and the black cars moved smoothly through empty lanes. Keisha felt her breath catch each time she looked out the window. She wondered what awaited her at the office building. She wondered how her life had shifted in these few days. Finally, the car pulled up outside a tall glass building that shone in the morning light. The men parked and opened the doors for her. She stepped onto the sidewalk, glancing up at the name etched above the entrance, Thompson Foundation. Her heart swelled. This was the beginning of something new for her, and for those she would help. As she turned toward the building doors, a calm, familiar voice spoke softly at her side. "You are exactly where you belong." She looked up and saw Mr. Thompson standing among the suited men and women. His eyes shone with gratitude and pride. He offered his hand, and she took it, knowing in that moment that her simple acts of kindness had led her to a life of greater purpose. Keisha stepped through the glass doors of the Thompson Foundation and felt a new kind of hope settle in her chest. The lobby was bright and filled with soft chatter. A woman behind the reception desk greeted her with a warm smile and offered her a name badge. Keisha pinned it on her coat. Keisha Johnson, Community Outreach Coordinator, and gasped softly. She had never held a title like that before. She breathed in deeply and followed a young man down a wide hallway lined with colorful posters of children sharing meals, seniors smiling, and neighborhoods coming together. Every image felt like a promise of good things to come. They entered a large room where a dozen people sat at round tables, each with a steaming mug of coffee and a small plate of muffins. The air smelled of cinnamon and fresh brew. Keisha took a seat and listened as Mr. Thompson stood at the front. He thanked her again for her kindness and introduced her to the team. There were program managers, volunteer coordinators, social workers, and fellow kitchen staff. Everyone clapped when her name was called. Keisha's cheeks warmed. They spoke of the Foundation's mission: to feed the hungry, support families in need, and offer training for sustainable work. Keisha realized that each person in the room believed in the same simple truth that had guided her. When we share what we have, we all grow stronger. After introductions, they divided into small groups to plan the next community event. Keisha joined a team tasked with creating a breakfast bridge program, where local diners partner with the foundation to provide morning meals to the elderly and students before school. She felt her heart flutter. This was her idea. Born of her secret meals to Mr. Thompson, she shared her vision. Simple takeout bags with soup, a bread and fruit delivered by volunteers who could also check on lonely neighbors. The group leaned in, asked questions, and offered suggestions. Add a note of encouragement in each bag. Coordinate with schools to reach students on free meal programs and recruit college volunteers for weekend shifts. Ideas flowed freely, and Keisha wrote them down, her pen flying across the paper. By lunchtime, they moved to the test kitchen, where a head chef laid out bowls of vegetable stew, turkey sandwiches, and oatmeal cups. Keisha donned an apron and practiced filling the bags with care. She wrote a short note, "You are not alone," on a bright card and slipped it into a bag. She sealed it with a sticker and smiled. The simple act felt as meaningful as it had at the diner. A photographer snapped pictures for the Foundation's newsletter, and a program manager encouraged Keisha to share her story. She felt a tingle of pride as the camera clicked, knowing her own journey would inspire others. Later that afternoon, Mr. Thompson invited her to his office on the top floor. The room looked out over the city. Sunlight sparkled on distant rooftops. He thanked her once more and asked how she felt. Keisha confessed that she sometimes still worried about bills and her brother's tuition. He nodded and handed her the envelope of checks again, now with a note reminding her to use them as needed. "You earned every penny," he said. "Now, let me help you as you help others." Keisha felt tears fill her eyes. She thanked him, promising to put the money to good use, to pay off her rent, and to cover her brother's next semester. She left the office feeling lighter than air. That evening, Keisha returned to her tiny apartment and called her brother. He answered on the first ring, surprised by the news. She told him she could pay for his books and part of his tuition. He laughed and cried on the phone, thanking her for believing in him. Keisha tucked the phone beside her ear and stared at the ceiling, feeling gratitude flood her heart. For the first time in years, she did not lie about her struggles. She sat at her small table, spread the checks in front of her, and made a plan. Pay rent, cover tuition, and set aside a small fund for emergencies. She folded the remaining checks and placed them in a special folder labeled Foundation Work. She felt a sense of order and freedom she had never known. The next morning, Keisha walked back to the diner where her journey had begun. The neon signs still glowed open, and the same vinyl booths waited inside. Her coworkers greeted her with curious smiles when she stepped in wearing her foundation badge. The manager offered her a cup of coffee on the house and shook her hand, as if he, too, sensed something had changed. She told them she would still work some shifts. She loved the diner and the familiar rhythm of serving, but she would now split her time with the foundation. They clapped and cheered, happy for her. As she poured coffee, she felt the weight on her shoulders lift. She realized that one small act of kindness had not only changed her life, but it also created new possibilities for everyone she knew. A week later, the first Breakfast Bridge event launched. Volunteers gathered before dawn in the diner's kitchen, where Keisha stood at the head of the line. Together they packed bags of oatmeal, fruit, and soup. Each bag bore a bright note of hope. Keisha watched as volunteers loaded them into cars and bicycles and set out toward schools and senior centers. She felt a lump in her throat as she thought of the old man she had once fed in secret. She pictured him smiling at his breakfast bag, finding warmth in a cold morning. She whispered a quiet thank you to him wherever he was. As the sun rose higher, the city came alive with stories of people receiving their meals and notes. A grandmother wrote to thank the foundation for remembering her birthday. A student sent a photo of her eating breakfast before school and holding her note with a grin. Neighbors began checking on one another, forming small circles of care. Keisha stood by the counter at the diner, sipping coffee alongside Mr. Thompson, who had joined her for breakfast. He nodded at the lively scene around them. "See what happens when kindness spreads?" he asked. She smiled, her heart full. That afternoon, Keisha closed her eyes for a moment and felt the hum of the diner blend with the buzz of the foundation office. She had moved between both worlds, one where she served pancakes and coffee, and one where she served hope and community. She realized that life would never be the same. She had more work ahead, more meals to plan, more lives to touch. But she also knew that with each step, she carried the simple truth that had guided her all along. Compassion can change the world. As dusk settled, Keisha walked home under the soft glow of street lamps. She paused outside her apartment building and looked up at the windows where her story had begun. She pressed her hand to her heart and smiled. God. No one would ever know all the nights she lay awake worrying, all the time she counted pennies, or how her hands shook as she placed meals on that diner table, but they would know this, that kindness, once given, grows and grows, touching lives in ways we cannot always see. And in that truth, Keisha found peace, purpose, and a promise that every small act of love can light the darkest night.